Great. And there is a Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen. So if you have questions throughout, please feel free to use that. There's also a chat box if you'd prefer to put questions there. We will be monitoring the chat box. So if any questions come up throughout the webinar, we will try to answer them on the fly. And if not, at the end of the session, we will have an opportunity to answer some of those questions. So again, I just want to say thank you for joining. As we get started, just to run through our agenda. So I will do a little bit of an introduction, at which point I will hand it over to Mike to walk us through some enforcement insights and compliance challenges within the pharmaceutical and agribusiness sectors. Sam will then take us through a live use case and demonstration of the Byte app. And if we have time, he even may take us through 2 of those. And then we'll go through some new features and enhancements. And as I said, wrap up with a Q&A. So with that, I will take a moment to introduce our speakers. So today we'll hear from Mike Ronayne, who's a former Homeland Security investigations agent and who has extensive experience in counterproliferation, export enforcement, and trade compliance investigations. He excels in uncovering illicit supply chain activities. And Sam Shu is our lead analyst on the Byte team. And Sam uses Byte on a daily basis. So being able to watch how he uses the app to screen commodities will be very informative. So thank you both for joining. So as we get started again, we hope today that everyone who's participating will leave with a deeper understanding of regulatory frameworks governing chemical imports, precursors, and commodities within the agribusiness sector, with practical knowledge on how to screen chemicals in Byte. And if you do have questions throughout, or you'd like to set up an account with Byte, please feel free to get in touch with us and we can set you up with a free trial of the application. And finally, just actionable insights into how to stay compliant and avoid enforcement actions in an industry that is increasingly scrutinized. So with that summary, I will hand it over to Mike to take us through those enforcement insights and compliance challenges that you see, Mike, from your perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. I appreciate it. Yeah, as you said, I'm a former special agent with Homeland Security Investigations. So for the next couple of minutes, we're just going to run through a few different areas and look at it from an enforcement standpoint and maybe some of the applicable laws. And we're going to talk about pharmaceuticals, chemicals, and we'll finish up with fentanyl. As in any business that involves international shipping, compliance with the applicable trade laws is obviously critical. In the United States, the global trade can be quite complex due to the numerous laws and regulations in play in any shipment. And the current climate is also challenging due to the fact that regulations are constantly changing and evolving. So taking a look at pharmaceuticals, this is obviously a business that's highly regulated. It deals with international trade laws, public health and safety issues, strict industry standards, and mandatory record-keeping requirements. Often companies are also required to provide certification to foreign customers. So with all this in play, it can become a complicated landscape to navigate. Now, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, mandates all products meet the same requirements, regardless of whether they're imported into the United States or produced domestically. Now, according to the FDA, when importing pharma products, they consider the following to ensure drugs meet their standards. They look at proper registration, verifying that the manufacturer is registered, listing, the product is listed in the FDA's drug establishment's current registration, drug application to see if there's any approved marketing, drug labeling, and drug current good manufacturing practices that's monitored to make sure manufacturers are in compliance with the requirements for methods, facilities, and controls. And also the FDA provides a list of import alerts, which will be coming to Byte in the near future to protect consumers against products with a history of known violations. Now, according to the FDA, they can place a product on an import alert, and I'll quote here, after discovering a violation and then detain future shipments of the products without having to test or otherwise physically examine it. and they refer to this as a detention without physical exam, or DWPE. And one of the biggest issues I think we face with pharmaceuticals are counterfeit pharmaceuticals. Now, the FDA Office of Criminal Investigations actually has special agents similar to HSI special agent, which I was, FBI. They're classified in the government as criminal investigators, and they investigate crimes involving counterfeit, unapproved medical products, fraud schemes, among others. Now, in terms of an enforcement example, recently, in July, the Department of Justice announced an indictment by a federal grand jury of an Indian national, Sanjay Kumar, for selling and shipping counterfeit oncology pharmaceuticals, to include Keytruda, a drug with 19 different approved uses for cancer treatment. Now, Kumar was charged with trafficking counterfeit drugs and conspiracy to traffic in counterfeit drugs, and if convicted, faces 20 years in prison. So before we move to our next topic, Anne, what lists, when we're talking about pharmaceuticals, would be applicable for blight?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So as you said, we are working to get those import alerts in by very soon. But in the meantime, we do have some of the lists that you referenced. So the FDA debarment list for drug imports, also for drug product applications. So there are just certain companies that are not allowed to even submit the drug product application. And then we actually have the food import debarment list from the FDA as well. Also, just in terms of FDA lists, we do have all the PGA codes associated with FDA. So if the FDA does indicate something additional is needed, that's available in BITE also.
Great, thanks. So we'll move to the CSA numbers. So in a couple minutes, as Ann said, if time permits, Sam is going to run through a use case on chemical abstract services registry numbers. Now, these are the numbers that are assigned to chemicals in the United States by the Chemical Abstract Services, or CAS, a division of the American Chemical Society. Now, the CAS is the authority on chemical information, provides the most current chemical information available. The registry of numbers allow scientists to have unique identifiers for chemical substances, and they state the government agencies rely on CAS registry numbers for substance identification and regulatory applications because they are unique, easily validated, and internationally recognized. So the regulatory compliance information, the CAS Chemical Compliance Index, consists of over 150 lists and includes harmonized tariff code recommendations for chemicals. As a shipper or importer, it's critical to ensure compliance with international trade regulations, and obviously failure to do so can lead to penalties and potentially fines. Also, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH, publishes guides to chemical hazards, including the CAS numbers. Now, NIOSH, which acts under two authorities, the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970 and the Federal Mine and Safety Act of 1977, recommends measures to reduce any adverse effects of chemical exposures. Now, in terms of shipping compliance, the import of toxic chemical substances is regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, as it's more commonly referred to, and enforced at the border by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, or CBP. Now, imports must be in compliance with the Toxic Substances Control Act, or TSCA. The TSCA is codified, if you're tracking the law, as Title 15 of United States Code 2601, which provides EPA with authorities related to chemical substances to include reporting, record keeping, and testing. Now, the harmonized tariff schedule numbers for these chemicals are typically found in chapters 27, 28, 29, and 38. According to CBP, importations of these chemicals into the United States require a statement. The statement really essentially needs to say one of two things. One, the shipment is subject to TSCA, is in compliance with all applicable rules and regulations, or two, chemicals are not subject. These chemicals that are part of the shipment are not subject to the TSCA. And as you may or may not know, EPA also has special agents as part of their criminal investigative division, and they investigate environmental criminal violations to include illegal dumping of hazardous materials, emissions violations, or any other crimes associated with those types of violations, to include fraud. So, in terms of the chemicals, what lists would we have in BITE that would be relative?
Yeah, so we have a few that can help people like also identify the CAS numbers. So we have the CAS most traded chemicals list is updated annually, so we have that in there. And then additionally, just International Convention Correlation has CAS numbers in it. Australia's Common Control List, which is a chemical weapons precursors. So if you actually want to screen against that. And then listed chemicals under the Controlled Substances Act as well. And that's so just listed chemicals that are controlled. And I know we're going to get to fentanyl next, so I'll hold back some of those, but most of those lists do have CAS numbers, and some of them do also have the HS codes as well. So both are searchable within BITE, and Sam will take us through a use case that demonstrates those.
Great, thank you. So as you said, yeah, we're gonna jump into fentanyl now as sort of my last topic here, and I think obviously a topic of a lot of recent press, and there's a lot of information out there about fentanyl. And we're gonna, if we have time, show a use case. And as most of us know, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid similar to morphine, but approximately 100 times more potent. Legitimate fentanyl is approved for medical purposes as an anesthetic, but fentanyl manufactured in illicit drug labs is widely distributed in the United States after being smuggled into the United States, typically through Mexico. And sometimes the street manufactured fentanyl actually looks like legitimate pills, such as OxyContin, Vicodin, but there's no oversight, obviously, on these pills, and this leads to overdoses and deaths. Enforcement agencies working the fentanyl problem include CBP, HSI, and DEA. CBP reports that more than 150 Americans die each day from synthetic drugs such as fentanyl. Last year alone, DHS, which includes CBP and my former agency, HSI, stopped over 43,000 pounds of fentanyl from being distributed, seized more than 3,600 pill presses. In addition, they also seized over $16 million in currency and effected 5,600 arrests. So I think those numbers give a little bit of insight as to how big this problem potentially is, or is, not potentially, it is. The precursor chemicals are critical to the process. And in terms of trade, one of the biggest issues that these chemicals, one of the biggest issues is these precursor chemicals are coming in to the US from Asia or arriving from Asia into Mexico, where the manufacturing takes place, and the finished product is smuggled across the southwest border or typically the southwest border into the US. I cited some of the DHS statistics a minute ago, but in addition to DHS, DEA, OFAC also plays a role in enforcement of this issue in terms of trying to block assets of some of the drug organizations. Just recently, on September 10th, OFAC announced sanctions against 9 Mexican nationals and 26 Mexican entities that were involved in fuel theft from Mexico's state-owned petroleum company that generated millions of dollars in revenue for Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generacion, a drug trafficking organization responsible for smuggling large amounts of fentanyl into the United States. Now, these sanctions mean that all property and interests of these entities in the United States are in control of U.S. persons are blocked. So, Ann, I'll finish there and hand it back to you to discuss lists relative to fentanyl.
Yeah, great. And just to quickly run through some of those. So we have a list from the Singapore Drug Agency, that's the Controlled Substances as specified under the 3rd schedule of the Misuse of Drugs Act. And that one's a really great list because, again, it does include both the CAS and the HS codes. So very helpful. Then we have fentanyl-related substances with currently known legitimate uses, and then also non-fentanyl opioids and related new psychoactive substances. So all of those are really good, just to screen if people are importing them, just to see kind of what the end use could be. So with that, Sam, I'll hand it over to you to take us through kind of what those lists look like in the app and give our listeners some use cases.
Great. Thanks, Ann and Mike. That's a lot of very informative and helpful information. So yeah, just kind of following up on what Mike said, the synthetic opioid fentanyl and its analogs have been at the forefront of the opioid crisis, with significant public health and safety concerns due to their high potency and potential for misuse. These substances are often synthesized using precursor chemicals, which are sometimes imported legally, but used illegally, like Mike said. So I'm going to go through a use case involving fentanyl, and then if we have time, I'll go through a use case involving the CAS numbers that Mike also mentioned earlier. So I'm going to share my screen. And if you all can see this.
Yep, we got it.
Okay, great. So this is our Byte platform, and I'm going to go through a use case looking at some of the lists involving chemicals that Anne has mentioned and that Mike has described in good detail. So these are going to be hypothetical scenarios. I'm going to run through as if I am a business and I am working with these chemicals and some of the steps that you would want to go through if you're encountering any of these chemicals in your course of business. So let's say I work for a leading pharmaceutical company committed to maintaining the highest standards of safety and compliance. Today, I am importing N-phenethyl for pyperidone, also known as NPP, a chemical used in legitimate pharmaceutical production, but also known as a precursor for fentanyl synthesis. Using the Byte platform, my compliance team would screen the shipment of NPP. We would start screening this shipment in our screening module within the app. This allows us to screen entities from watch lists all across the world. There's tens of thousands of entities and people that are not just sanctioned and designated, but are doing business with those. So second and third tier entities. And then we also have our products section of the screening with very similar filters that I'll go through in a moment. And we would begin screening this NPP as a high-risk precursor in the products section of our Byte app. So I could go into the search bar, search NPP, and I could identify NPP as a high-risk precursor, depending on the results that come up. And I would find this exact match, N-phenethyl for pyperidone, NPP, the HS code, and I could see that it is a controlled substance as specified under the third schedule of Misuse of Drugs Act. Now we would look into our potential new supplier of this. Let's say, for instance, that our supplier is a company called Han Hong Medicine. We would start by screening them within our Peoples and Companies tab that I just clicked on, and we would go through the same process. We would look at Han Hong Medicine, find the results there, and we would look at our results. I see Han Hong down here. I'm going to click on that one. This is actually Han Hong Pharmaceutical Technology, which has been designated by OFAC. And we can see an alternative name is Han Hong Medicine. So we can see that they have a listed relationship with QB Company as well. And we see them listed on here as well by OFAC, alternative name Han Hong Medicine. So we can see where the relationship is there. And armed with this knowledge that I just gained from my potential supplier, I can quickly visit our Byte GPT module. and I can generate a detailed risk analysis report highlighting its association with fentanyl production and regulatory requirements. So I have my prompt for ByteGPT here. I'll walk through it with you for a second while ByteGPT is giving me an answer, which can take a minute. But I'm asking it to generate a risk assessment report on NPP, highlighting the chemical risk identification, detailed information about NPP, regulatory requirements related to NPP, as well as supplier verification that I just showed you, surrounding Han-Hong medicine, and Han-Hong pharmaceutical technology and Hubie that they're related to. Also asking it to generate risk mitigation recommendations, best practices for maintaining compliance and reducing the risk, and then spitting out a summary and action plan. This would be the key findings from the risk assessment and the recommended actions to ensure that you're compliant and you can uphold your reputation and safety and integrity of your products. So this is just showing where the module is going through to find all the information that it's looking for, and then it will help us by giving us some of the information. So we can see here that we have the CAS number for NPP, some of the chemical risk identification. It is a synthesis of pharmaceutical compounds, notably fentanyl. As we found out it is a precursor chemical through this, and some of the requirements and controls are listed here as well, like what we were looking for. And then jumping into some of the supplier verification, we can see Han-Hong and inclusions of the watch list, Han-Hong Pharmaceutical, sanctioned by OFAC, as well as Hubie, sanctioned by OFAC. Some of the risk mitigation recommendations that it gives us here, regulatory compliance, supplier accountability, safety measures training, document management and reporting. It'll go through all of these for us, as well as a summary and an action plan. So it tells us that NPP is heavily regulated due to its manufacturing illicit opioids like fentanyl, as well as the supplier risks involved that we found out. Then we have our recommended actions to make sure that you are staying diligent. So I would suggest saving these prompts when you're using ByteGPT that you've created so that you can reuse them when you're creating new risk reports. So armed with all of this information that we got regarding NPP and the suppliers, we can decide to use a more reputable supplier just to ensure that we're being compliant and reducing our risk. So that is one of the use cases. And if we have time, I'm going to walk through one more involving CAS numbers, because I know that Mike discussed these, and I want to make sure that I can touch on it a little bit. So
That sounds great.
great. So we'll go back to our home page of Byte, and we'll start looking at another example. So again, another hypothetical example. We'll go based off of a chemical commodity, let's say sulfur dichloride. Imagine you're a US manufacturer of an insecticide, and you're importing this chemical as a chemical agent for your insecticide product. Your first step in any commodity risk assessment, as we saw earlier, would be to check this against global commodity control lists using the Byte screening tool. And we can quickly confirm any controls or regimes that may be associated with sulfur dichloride. So we can start by going to the products, typing in sulfur dichloride, and we see the results here. We find 5 hits with 1 HS code associated with these hits, and you can open up any of these results and see all of the information regarding them. To confirm your exact match, though, it is good to be able to add the CAS number because it is very specific to this chemical. We found here in one of the results for sulfur dichloride the CAS number, and I can copy that, and I can add another entry to an additional search bar in the screening tool, and I can narrow down my results, but also expand it as well. I can check it against chemical precursor lists. There's a lot of different filters and lists that we have in Byte. This is whenever I am analyzing anything to do with chemicals, I'm always adding the precursor chemicals lists, and I can apply that, and I can find the sulfur dichloride CAS most scheduled trading chemicals list that we just looked at a moment ago to get that CAS number, along with more of the results here. So we can see additional lists that the CAS number on, such as the Australia common control lists. And if we want to go back, take off these filters, and just look for any results involving these, we can find potentially more results for that CAS number or sulfur dichloride. Adding in the CAS number again after clearing the filter, just to make sure that everything is taken off. When you're going through these lenses and looking at the filters, you want to make sure that you're clearing them before adding additional searches. And I can see, like I said, that this CAS number is associated with sulfur dichloride being on the Australia common control lists, the CAS most scheduled trading chemicals, and European Union restricted measures applying to Russia. So as an importer, you would want to definitely go through all of these lists to make sure to find any list that your commodity might be associated with. And having this information regarding your commodity that you're going to be importing related to the CAS number or the commodity name is definitely going to help you stay compliant when you're importing this product for your business. And Byte is a great tool to help you do that. So that wraps up the two use cases that I wanted to share with you all.
Thanks, Sam. That was super helpful, and it's always great to see how someone who uses the tool on a regular basis can kind of give their inside tips and tricks. Like, I really like how you have your GPT prompt saved. Just, one of those useful things that only a power user would know. So thank you. One other list that we haven't touched on yet that I think, as we're looking at both pharmaceuticals and agriculture, is the ADCVD list. So I know typically that is a list that is thought of as like a more manufacturing list. But what we've seen is that ADCVD, so anti-dumping countervailing duty orders, are increasingly targeting agricultural products, just to reflect the growing concerns over unfair trade practices in global food markets. So as countries like the US seek to protect domestic industries from subsidized or dumped imports, agricultural commodities like fresh produce, seafood, livestock are also all facing heightened scrutiny. So again, just as you're importing in these various industries, keeping in mind that there's kind of always another regulation to be paying attention to. So that is just something I wanted to quickly highlight. And then looking at some upcoming features in Byte. So one thing we didn't touch on today is the ability for bulk screening. So that is something worth checking out, and we are making changes to that as well. And then, as Mike said, getting those FDA import alerts. So we are always adding additional data sets and different features to the app. So if you are a current user and you see a list that you think would be helpful, please do reach out. Happy to figure out how it can be incorporated in, especially as we look at potential commodity notifications coming down the line. So a lot of exciting stuff in our pipeline. And again, anyone who's interested in learning more about that, please do reach out and we can walk through what those updates look like. So with that, I will just double check our Q&A. I haven't seen any questions come in so far, but if anyone has any questions, we'll just give it a few seconds here to see if any come in. Let me double check our chat as well. I'm not seeing anything there, but Sam, Mike, and I are available, so feel free to reach out through our info@bytedata.io email, or on LinkedIn, or I believe our emails are on the website as well. So with any questions, we are available and happy to provide any additional insight that we may have. As I've said before, if you do want access to the Byte platform and what Sam showed, free trials are available. So again, through our website, you can just log in and register and get access to that trial. And we provide regular updates on our data sets through our social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, X. So any of those social media platforms, give us a follow. And then we also have a Slack channel now that we provide daily updates on the data updates within the app. So if you want to follow along with all of the changes going on in these various fields and controls, please do sign into one of those platforms and follow along. I have not seen any questions come in, so I think from here I will just say a big thank you to all of our participants for joining, and to Sam and Mike for your incredible insight. Have a nice day.